The Blackstone Launchpad
and Techstars network at UCR really helped me turn my idea into a sustainable business.
I've gained a sense of direction.
This program gave us access to the amazing mentors.
Helped me learn more about effective marketing, developing business models,
my entrepreneurial mindset, business plan development, customer discovery, and further improved my startup.
The Office of Technology Partnerships, in partnership with the Blackstone Charitable Foundation and Techstars, delivers Launchpad at UCR to help students succeed in entrepreneurship and their careers. Whether you have an idea, have a startup, or are just curious about entrepreneurship, Launchpad at UCR will offer a variety of resources at all stages of an idea and venture development. This includes workshops and networking events, one-on-one mentoring, Blackstone and Techstars programming and funding, access to opportunities like pitching on stage at CES or traveling to New York to participate in pitching competitions. You can also join ConnectR platform to connect with students, alumni, faculty, and staff to advance your career, find mentors, join startups, attend exclusive events, and much more.
Welcome to the Women's Resource Center. Let's meet our staff.
The Women's Resource Center was founded in 1973. Our mission is to engage student, staff, faculty, and community by promoting gender equality, awareness, inclusivity, and proactive response around issues that intersect with gender.
Our programs and events focus on equipping and empowering this generation of women leaders both on campus and in the community. Our annual Persist Conference, which began in 2017, is the largest women's political engagement event in the Inland Empire.
Free Logic is here to level the playing field and turn ideas into reality. By using modern technology and innovative minds, we hope to transform everyday ideas into something extraordinary. We hope to build our community by partnering with like-minded innovators and inspired creators to bring us all to new heights and create an environment where anyone can succeed. Our team is made up of passionate and incredibly skilled individuals that wish not only to do more for our partners, but for the community we are a part of as well. In a digital era where technology dominates our everyday lives, it has become much harder for small businesses to break through the mold. Our goal at Free Logic is to level the playing field by using both modern and innovative strategies that will not only bring success, but also prepare our clients for the future.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us for the second day of the Entrepreneura Summit, brought to you by the Office of Technology Partnerships at the University of California, Riverside. My name is Mihai Patru, and I'm Executive Director of Caravanserai Project, a hybrid mission-driven organization based in the Inland Empire, supporting the journeys of social innovators and change makers. we are very honored today to bring to you as part of this summit three of the most inspiring social innovators that we had the privilege at Caravanserai Project to support and work with as part of different initiatives like Seed Lab or the various breakthrough masterclasses. And I'm more than happy to introduce to you Susie Gomez, Mary Lou Adriatico, and Ashley Hill. And when we were discussing about how to design this conversation, I thought about starting with some short personal stories that I got to know because we've been working together for at least 3 years. So Susie Gomez is the president of the Inland Empire Community Collaborative. What's interesting about Susie is that she's both a budding and seasoned entrepreneur and change maker whose work has literally inspired hundreds of mission-driven leaders and organizations in the Inland Empire. As president of the Inland Empire Community Collaborative, Susie has supported various mission-driven leaders in the Inland Empire and beyond. As co-founder of a startup social business called Amigos Pottery, Susie is tapping into her artistic talents, but also highlighting her cultural background by promoting and supporting local artists in Mexico. Ashley Hill is a social worker, and I think for the last couple of years, she has become one of the leading voices raising awareness about sex trafficking in the region and beyond. Her organization, Magdalena's Daughters, aims to redesign the way we support the recovery and healing of victims of sex trafficking. Mary Lou Adriatico, she's the co-founder of the Seed Project. Together with her associate, Joseph Posadas, Mary Lou has built a very successful venture whose priorities are the well-being and the future of high school students in foster care. And their work in Moreno Valley High School District is a perfect example of how determination and constant work can turn an idea and a pilot project that Seed Project was 3 years ago into a very successful mission-driven enterprise. And I would like to invite our speakers to talk a bit about their work. But before that, I just want to challenge them with a question. And I know I have missed a lot of elements, important elements about their work and about their entrepreneurial journey. So my first question is, if we were to create a short documentary about your entrepreneurial journey, what would be the first scene that documentary will start with? And what would be the most important scene that you would like to include in this, let's say, 10-minute short movie? Susie, would you like to start?
Oh, first. Oh, what a great question. I don't want to be first. Okay. Well, because I'm wearing two hats today. So the one hat that, it seems more familiar to me because I've been doing it so much longer is my work around nonprofits and the work on building capacity for organizations and all of that. But when you said the idea about entrepreneurship, of course, it brings me back to the heart and the work I did with Seed Lab as a Seed alumni and Amigos Art and Pottery. And, I think it's kind of a mystery. This is going to be a film, a documentary on the challenges and the joys, to be honest, of art and artisans. The mission for Amigos Pottery was for us to look at ways in which we could have a legacy for skilled artisans and introduce them to the world here and a new audience for them, and to preserve a legacy of artisans. And so I think, for a short documentary and just the opening, kind of chaos at the beginning with me and Myra making trips to Mexico, lost in some airport for 12 hours or whatever. It was in places that people told us, families and friends told us, what are you doing in Michoacan, Mexico? Two girls traveling, meeting artisans and dirt roads in the back hills of Mexico. And it was one of the most memorable trips we've ever had. So it kind of would be like a travel documentary, but added with this incredible meeting these incredible artists, right? And they would be the showcase of the documentary, definitely. And more importantly, I think it's the joy of what art and artisans bring, and the faces and the work itself, that lens that you don't have to have words, you just have to have the images. So that's what I'm thinking in my head.
Thank you. Mary Lou?
So I actually have been watching The Bachelor lately. I don't usually watch reality TV, but when you're asking about documentaries, I think mine would be more on the reality TV end. And my first scene would probably be me crying. I don't know which setting, because I've done a lot of crying throughout this process, but I think the reason I say that is because, you know, we look at a lot of our successes and we're excited about them and we talk about them a lot. But for people who are starting up, I think it's important to highlight that it has been struggling. There have been a lot of struggles in the process, and I think without those struggles, there wouldn't be any growth. And I have been through a lot of growth in the past couple of years, and just challenging myself, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a person, what that looks like for me as a woman of color in certain spaces and business spaces, or talking to school district leaders and things like that. And having to learn how to maneuver those things, I think that would be what this documentary would look like. And also wanting to get that final rose and never knowing, like, am I going to get it? Are we going to get that contract? Are we going to get that grant? Are we going to get the funding? And always, though you believe in yourself, always still having a slight doubt every so often along the way. And I think that's why mine would be more like reality TV, because it is real. And when you're actually doing it, you don't realize it till you're really doing it.
Thank you. Ashley?
So when I picture my first scene, I feel like it would be kind of like CSI, except I'm not like a detective or anything. I'm a therapist. And so I picture it, because if you really want to know the history of why Magdalena's Daughters got started, you have to go back to like me working as a therapist for our county. And so I think it would be about, you know, the hustle and bustle, what's really happening to our foster youth who are missing or who are running away often, and how we're getting caught up with them. Also, like, if I could, breach confidentiality, it would be like, a recording of me and my clients actually talking about like what happened on the streets, because I think that was one of the biggest motivators, right? What happens when you are in sex trafficking and when you get caught up in it. And I was crying, like I was on the verge of tears. I remember specifically this one client, I couldn't hold it together. And so if I was experiencing all that emotion in that session, oh my gosh, I can only imagine what she's experienced. And so I just think that highlighting, the work that is involved when being a therapist and hearing a lot of this stuff that happens on the streets, and also the stories of our foster youth. So, yeah.
And all three of you mentioned your personal stories and the different hats that you were wearing when you started working on your venture. Susie, everyone knows about IECC in the region, and everyone knows about your work. Mary Lou, you were about to start your PhD program. Ashley, you were already a social worker. So what pushed you to get out of some sort of comfort zone and start a project all by yourself with limited or no resources, while still keeping your daily job and working on, continuing your initial projects?
I'll go. So I think for me, it was just, I was getting angry. Anger turns into passion, obviously, but I was just seeing so much that was happening within our foster care system, and the residential placements that our foster youth reside, and it was making me angry. And I'm a huge advocate for foster youth. I'm a huge advocate. So when it came to a point where I couldn't do anything, and it was just like the systemic problems and barriers that were preventing me from doing something, I was like, well, let me be a solution at this point, because it was really bothering me. And I also feel like this was something that I was called to do from God. So it's a mixture of both of those things. I was feeling really angry and really passionate about my foster youth, especially the clients that I served, and knowing what really happens in the streets. And so that is kind of what like pushed me and said, okay, you be a solution. No one else wants to do it. It's so hard work, right? No one else wants to do it. So be a solution. And that's what I did.
Thank you. Mary Lou, I remember at Seed Lab at one point, we asked you, why you? And your answer was, if not me, who else? Have things changed? Looking back, and you are now an established organization, you are working all over Moreno Valley and supporting so many kids. Looking back at why you, has that changed?
No, I like what Ashley said. I think that's the same place that I'm coming from. So I have experience working for Child Protective Services as a social worker and also a foster family agency. And so it was that same drive that the system is broken. Obviously, the system's not going to fix itself, and it's up to somebody. And so I also had that same kind of fire, like, okay, if no one's going to fix it, then we're going to fix it. And since we started doing it, I've been exposed more to other nonprofits that are in the area that are doing similar work, or people like Ashley who are doing kind of like parallel work. And it's definitely growing, but just because there's a lot of people doing it doesn't mean it's fixing everything. You know, like I can't change an entire system by myself. But as I work with each of our students, the more I realize like you can impact one life, you can make a difference in one person's life, and you might not be able to change the system, but it is enough to really influence how these students think, how they grow up to be. And I think that's really all that matters. And that's what my biggest drive is. When we first started the program, when we piloted it, we said the very first day, as long as one student walks through our door, it'll be enough. A student walked through our door and plenty of others after him. And that same student is actually graduating this year. And just seeing them every day continues to be that drive of why we do what we do.
Thank you. Susie, you were an artist, and your background, I remember you went to an art school, but you had this gap, you know, when you were working as a community leader and then IECC, and then you kind of, you know, decided to go back to your passion about art and pottery and connect with the artisans in Mexico. What made you create that switch?
I think, you know, at the time, you know, I'm unlike, you know, Ashley and Mary Lou, I was coming to the end of my work career. And, you know, this idea is I was actually going to live 6 months out of the year in Mexico and 6 months here in the United States, and me retiring, that should have happened 7 years ago. And then it didn't happen. So, and I think what initiated this idea was actually a conversation I had with yourself, you know, you and Steven at Mission Inn. I remember sitting at that table, and suddenly it was like, there's this dream. What do you really want? But what I really want is one day is like to go to Mexico, and I'm seeing these cultures and artisans that are disappearing every day, where there'd be communities of 600 artists. There's less than 30 of them now because there's not a way to get the artwork out anymore, and because of everything that was happening. This is pre-COVID, so things are even worse for them now. So I thought, what can you do? Here's the heart of I have as a social worker, but what is the thing that drives me, that I love, that is another part of me that I wanted to do? And I think Seed created a space for that dream that I always had to be real. Like, I could actually do this. You know, these are the steps that you need. These are the roadblocks that Seed provided for me in terms of a journey that I am very familiar with nonprofit, but I was not familiar with the endeavor of starting a venture, right? It was new to me. Everything was new to me. So I think that that risk of wanting to do that, but with the same intentionality of seeing an injustice and knowing that there's a place that it only takes one person to really make a difference, and that it's the same in nonprofit or in the work we do in that way is the same in terms of what I wanted to do. Me and my associates, Mayra, Castanero, and Ben.
Right, thank you. And I know we can engage with our viewers on YouTube. So if you have any questions for Susie, Mary Lou, or Ashley, please share them in the chat box on YouTube. And moving forward, both Susie and Mary Lou, you talked about nonprofit and for-profit. And all three of you have experiences in both sectors. And that's more of a technical question. And I think social innovators and people who want to engage in the social impact sector should know more about why go for a for-profit model or a non-profit model. What was your rationale before, choosing one model? And Mary Lou, the SEED project has experienced both.
Sorry, if there was a question there, I didn't get it because my computer cut out.
The question was, why would a social innovator, a change maker, would choose a for-profit model over a non-profit model, or the other way around?
I mean, both come with its own benefits. So just some background story. My partner and I decided to start our program as an LLC, but the reason we chose to do that was because it was the only thing we knew how to do. We did not know how to start a nonprofit. We didn't know the 501c3 process. We didn't know of all the resources that were around to help start those. So we were like, okay, an LLC is pretty straightforward. Let's start up that way. And then for maybe 2 years, we did it as an LLC, and then just maybe a couple months ago, just got our 501c3 status. And so we decided, we've always wanted to be a nonprofit. The reason was because it was also this notion that nonprofits are the only way that you could serve or do social good, right? So like, you think for-profit, you think, like money hungry type businesses that aren't doing things for good. Typically, that's how I at least saw it. So I was like, I want to do something for good. So I want to be a nonprofit. And ever since then, we were like, okay, we'll be a 501c3. And so now we have now become a 501c3. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to be open to more grants, and we didn't want our funding to be, my internet is unstable, but we didn't want our funding to be purely like contracts. We wanted to be able to diversify our funding streams more. And we thought, especially with having like grants and donors and things like that, we wanted to open up that avenue. So that's why we went the nonprofit route. But since we were an LLC for the first 2 years, I have learned that it is possible to do social good as a for-profit. I think the benefits that came with that would be like having more control. Obviously, with a nonprofit, you have a board of directors that's overseeing you. But as a nonprofit, you're not taxed. That was a con for being an LLC, is that we were taxed as individuals. And so we didn't really know what we were doing entirely. And there was one point where the IRS sent us a $5,000 bill that we ended up paying off out of pocket. But they do both definitely come with their own pros and cons, and it just depends on what you're looking for in your own venture.
Yeah, just to mention that your initial work and the contracts you received and the way you expanded your organization was as an LLC.
Yes, we are doing the exact same work just as a nonprofit now. So if you're in between both, I think there is no good or bad per se. It just depends on what you're looking for and kind of what you want to cater your organization to. But for us, we did want to eventually expand as a nonprofit, and we knew that, and we didn't want to keep getting taxed, and we wanted the 501c3 status, and we wanted grants, and so that's why we went that route. But it is literally the exact same organization, just functioning under a different.
Thank you. Susie, you spent so many years in the nonprofit sector, and Amigos Pottery is a for-profit business model.
Yeah.
How was that transition, and what made you change, since both experiences are about helping community and delivering social impact? What was the rationale behind creating Amigos Pottery as a for-profit business?
For us, and because for that purpose, I'm very familiar with the nonprofit side, and also filing for 501c3 status. And, we provide capacity building to organizations starting off wanting to get their 501c3. So I think for us, it was a question of freedom, that I know nonprofit and there is restrictions as well as the opportunities for diversifying of funding. Absolutely. That's the biggest advantage of, and mission-driven organizations around nonprofits is that you have, private foundations, individual donors, corporate foundations that you're able to, glean, funds for your organization. But for the work that we wanted to do for Amigos Art and Pottery, we didn't have to answer to a board. We didn't have to answer to a funder. Our dollars were not going to be restricted to programs or services, and for us as a wanting to have social impact, but also having the freedom to spend the dollars and drive our own mission the way we wanted as associates seemed like a better fit for us starting off. So that's the decision we made as a group.
Thank you. Ashley, your organization is very interesting in terms of the models that you can follow. You have the residence homes, then you have the work that you are doing. What made you go for a for-profit model? And Magdalena's Daughters is a nonprofit organization.
So I knew that in order to be a short-term residential therapeutic home, I had to be a nonprofit. So that was one, right? So that was already figured out for me. But in terms of what like Mary Lou was talking about, the benefits, the diversifying of income, things like that, those were like what created the, I would probably have done it a nonprofit way anyways, you know what I mean? And I've just become aware of like hybrid models, honestly.
Right.
A for-profit can be social impact, just like Tom's, right? Tom's is a shoe, their product is a shoe, but then they give money to a social cause, right? And so they have those types of models too, which I was like, oh, that's interesting, that's great. Maybe it would have been differently if I knew about that or learned about that earlier. But definitely that's why we became a nonprofit, because I already knew I had to be one. And there's benefits of being a nonprofit. There's also some limitations though, so especially with grants and things like that.
Yeah, Ashley brought the hybrid model. Mary Lou, are you considering keeping both the LLC and now that you're a nonprofit, kind of developing both ventures simultaneously? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so we actually chose to dissolve the LLC completely last year. That was for numerous reasons. People were telling us to keep it, and it is a benefit to keep it and run too, but just where we were in life, we are planning to get married soon and like move into a house, and trying to upkeep both seemed like it was a little bit out of our reach right now, but that doesn't mean it isn't something that we want to do in the future. Hopefully once we settle down in a couple of years, move down the line, we're thinking of opening a coffee shop, and that would work in conjunction with the nonprofit, and we would hire some of our students as like job training. And so we definitely know that there is a hybrid model, and we want to incorporate that eventually, but right now we just weren't in the place to. But there are very successful hybrid models. One of the ones that always comes to mind when I think about it is Homeboy Industries. And so they have like a little cafe, and they do what they do. And so I can only wish that one day we'll have something to that level.
And about this plethora of ideas that you have as an early stage as entrepreneur, how do you know, you have a problem, you're thinking about solutions. How do you know which solution would work best? And how do you know which path you want to go?
I'm a person who has a lot of ideas all the time. And I actually start a lot of random businesses. Like I sell stickers, I make jewelry dishes. Especially since pandemic happened, I've been doing all sorts of crafts and seeing how can I connect it to the seed program if possible. But I'm actually a person who I'll try it, and if it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, it succeeds. But I think the main point is piloting is what we learned a lot about. Like try it out a little bit, see if it works, and if it does, then great. If not, then it doesn't. But also, doing your research and seeing, like I said, right now the coffee shop is one of our ideas. And the reason we've come up with that is because all of our students, they want jobs. Like that's one of their main things. They want to work through high school. Is anyone hiring? What are the barriers that exist for foster youth to get jobs? And so, you know, just using that like background research to fuel some of the ideas and make sure they're not just some crazy ideas, which I do have sometimes, but it's pretty much for me has been trial and error.
Ashley, you've been working in this sector for a while, so, and I'm sure you thought of different solutions to tackle the problem that made you in the first place create Magdalena's Daughters. What made you choose this one in particular?
So I'm all about research and all about collecting data. And so I know that for the clients that I had when I was a therapist for the county, I would like literally have like my or unofficial types of questions I would ask them, like, what would you want in the home? Like, what do you need? So I would do my own data, and I wasn't like, it's not like I was just writing stuff down, and it was just stuff that I was, just having casual conversations about. And so that kind of fueled like our three main values, one of our three main values, which is family, safety, and hope, right? And so a lot of our foster youth want that sense of family. A lot of our foster youth want to feel safe, right? Especially if you are involved in human trafficking, right? And you have traffickers coming to the home. They want to feel safe. They want to feel safe enough to be able to open up in therapy and talk about what's happening. And then the hope feature, kind of like what Mary Lou was saying, they want something that they can have hope for, like a job or like some skills. And so bringing all that together, and then really relying on research. So still doing research, and I'm actually trying to conduct research right now, and we're partnered with a local university in San Bernardino to actually start conducting some research. That's what it's all about, is like doing the piloting, making sure you're gathering research and making sure it's effective.
Thank you. Susie, I've seen Amigos Pottery not changing completely, but every time you were with your artisans and the people that you want to support, you always came back with a slightly different perspective where you want to go. So how do you know, since you started, you've been working on this startup for, I think, a couple of years, how do you know which way to go?
So unlike Ashley and Mary Lou, it was like we were all over the place, and poor Mihai and Steven were always trying to rein us in. Every trip we made, we would be like, oh no, copper, how did we end up? We were potters. We had, our initial idea was we were just going to work with potters, right? And introduce potters that we knew in all different regions of Mexico. And then we met these incredible artisans in Santa Clara de Cobre in Michoacan, these copper artisans, right? And then it became, okay, no, we're going to do some of that. We're going to have some of those, introduce that. So I say, and honestly, because it was new to us, is there lessons learned? Absolutely. I think if we would have been more focused at the beginning in terms of, it would have saved us time, but I think it's the journey of us finding what the solutions are. That is the joy about designing what you want to do. And I think that it makes the experience of you, the work you choose to do, have more value in terms of just, it solidifies the mission for your organizations, right? Because you do have these new experiences. I think you have to be open to making mistakes. And I think that maybe comes with age for me, is realizing that it can't get perfect because I've never done this. So I need to be able to make a mistake and then learn from that mistake and say, how would I do it better? And what would I need to do to make it better? And exactly as you're saying, Mihai, with COVID happening as we were graduating and half of our inventory stuck in Mexico until last month, right, in crates, we've had to adapt to how we even sell and everything about it. And that's all a lesson as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. And more of a technical question. Let's talk a bit about money. And obviously, you can have the best solution for your community or the group you want to support. But if there are you find no fundings and financial support, you can't have a lot of impact or at all. In your cases, how do you approach that aspect? Any suggestions for those who are watching us on YouTube and are thinking about starting their own venture, whether a for-profit or a non-profit business? What are the, let's say, the top 3 things they should consider when it comes looking for funding, looking for donors, or selling products, selling services?
I think for me, I guess, let me just try to slow it down. It's all in my head. So I think one of the things for me is what I learned early on is that not everyone wants to hear about money all the time. You asking for money all the time. And so really providing some value, right, to the people that you want to serve or to your community members. And so I learned this, well, probably like recently within like this past few months or whatever, learning to not just ask, but just to kind of say, well, how can I help you? Right? How can I help you? What do you guys need? What would you guys like from Magdalena's Daughters? And just connecting is another thing, just making connections, making relationships, because the number one thing I learned is like people talk, man. People talk a lot. And I learned that very early on. And so that's why I'm always out there connecting with people, because the more people know about me, the more people will refer me to people who have the resources that I need. And also just building credibility. I like to say, I like to tell people, like, we're in like if you're starting a nonprofit or a for-profit, you're in like this weird position where people don't know who you are. So they're like, who are you? You want me to donate what? And so really having to like build that credibility and say, no, this is who I am. Be consistent, right, with who you are and what you are for. And then show like some work. So show like some activities that you're doing with your organization, because I think that's just really huge in building credibility, so people can trust that you're going to use the money for what you're saying you're going to use the money for. And so I think for me, I think those are the 3 things: credibility, connections. What was my other one? I can't remember, but those are my 2 things.
Okay. Susie, you have been raising a lot of money for your nonprofit work and your IECC and all the organizations that are part of that collective, but also because you started Amigos Pottery as a for-profit business, mm-hmm. While combining those 2 experiences, what would be not necessarily your advice, your experience, and if you were to go back, what would you change when it comes to the financial aspects?
So the easy answer for me is on the nonprofit side, right? Because I know that better. Would be first and foremost what I tell people that are nonprofits, and probably the most common made error for nonprofits around funding or when they first start a nonprofit is the assumption that they're just always going to get funding right away. This is not true, right? So you need to recognize that you will be without money for a while. And having a 501c3 does not guarantee you get grants the first 3 years. So you also have to be prepared for that. Although sometimes you do, and it's great. The reality about that is a little bit different. So I would say this, the cultivation that Ashley was talking about is, I think, another key component in both for-profit and in business is this cultivation of relationships with people who are going to be either key champions or funders or donors for you. And that takes a lot of work, and people don't realize that. People don't give to organizations or even sometimes mission. People give money to people they have relationships with, right? Who you know, if they have the same belief and passion around the work you're doing. And unless you take the time to have them get to know you, those things don't happen. So cultivation is like number 1. And then I would say, be fearless. Be fearless about asking, because it's not, and I'll go with a cultural kind of barrier around that. I started a nonprofit, and the idea that I would have to go ask somebody for money made me physically sick. It's not in my nature. I don't even ask my own parents for money. How the heck would I go to a stranger and ask for money? And now, as people know me, I will ask anybody for money. I mean, I'm shameless about asking for money. So you have to be fearless about being told no, because you're going to be told no more than you're going to be told yes. So on the lessons I learned on the business side was I needed to have a reserve, because we went through cash super fast. We were just, and this was we built a budget and said, let's just stay with it, but it just didn't seem to happen. And also unexpected expenses that we did not know as a new business that we were gonna have. So I think the lessons would be frugal in terms of your expenditures at the beginning, and also maybe learn. I wish I would have been with other like-minded maybe organizations that could have shared something with me. I wish I would have done that. That's about the only thing I can think of. So yeah, that's my answers.
Meryl, when you graduated Seat Lab in 2019, I remember a conversation we had at UCR when you and Joseph were thinking about giving up, because you didn't see any future in the Seed project, and mainly when it came to the financial part and getting financial support. And suddenly over the summer, you got this huge contract that really put your organization on the map and helped you implement your work in the high schools around Moreno Valley. How was that experience, and what did require from you to be successful and move from a situation when you were thinking of giving up to a situation when both of you gave up your jobs to be able to focus on your enterprise?
I think Ashley and Susan covered it almost exactly what Susan was saying, is that you have to be prepared to not be paid for a little bit at first. And so we piloted our program for 2 years at one high school for free. So I left a full-time job to have a part-time job, and then Joe stepped down from his job to work part-time so we could do both. And we were living off of part-time incomes. And so that was a struggle, and that was what made us feel like giving up. Like we couldn't keep doing this because we needed to save up. You know, we're young, and we still wanted a lot for our future, and we couldn't live off of 2 part-time jobs. And we were like, it's either we quit and just go full-time doing something else, or we go full-time doing the Seed program. But it felt like going full-time seemed impossible. And obviously we wanted to ask for money, but we didn't really know how much our program was worth. We didn't know how much we could ask for. And we were like, okay, let's just put in, what is that called? Like our, I don't know what it's called.
Business plan? Or...
But we put it into the school district, and the key there was the networking. So the superintendent happened to be our former high school principal and middle school principal, and I was the valedictorian. So a lot of higher ups in the school district remembered who I was. And when we put in like how much we were asking for, it like traveled down, you know, the grapevine to all these people, and they knew who we were. So it was a lot of that building connections and networking and not being afraid to ask for it, because I think that was our biggest challenge. Was we were afraid. We are so scared. Well, what if it doesn't happen? What if it doesn't happen? What if it doesn't happen? That we never asked ourselves, what if it does? And I do remember one day crying in the car in the rain in front of like a burger spot, thinking like, I can't do this anymore, because what if it doesn't happen? And then of course it did happen. And I think the greatest piece of advice someone told me that I will always remember is that if you follow what you're passionate about, the money will come. And it won't come right away, but I'm a firm believer in if you do good work and you're being honest with people that you're working with, that people will see that and they'll see the value in your program, and eventually, whether that's through grants or through the networks that you make, that funding will come. And then my third one that I wrote down was to look for specific funding streams. I think there's a lot of grants that are specific to certain organizations, and look for those because not everybody is qualified.
Or otherwise, and I'm certainly not here to give credit.
So look for specific funding streams. Ours was the LCAP, that is funded from the government to the school districts that is specifically for their students in foster care. And so if you look for those things, because there are specific grants and funding streams that are meant for whatever you, more than likely they are there for what you're looking for.
Thank you. And just all three of you mentioned having a good reputation, a lot of connections with the community that you're part of, but not only. And because it is about, the summit is called Entrepreneura Summit, and we are here to also talk about the role of women entrepreneurs and how things have changed, and what are some of the aspects that are still require a lot of change. And based on your experience, all three of you have been very, very active in the professional world. What would be your, if you were to have a list that about the role of women and what needs to be changed in the way we look at entrepreneurs and the environment that we are part of, what should be changed and who should be responsible for that change? Susie?
I'll go first because I think there's still such inequity. And most notably, I can speak to the nonprofit sector, to be candid. Leaders of color, women of color, in terms of holding positions of power. Yes, you'll see them in program staff. You'll see them as program managers, executive directors, but you rarely see them as board chairs and or CEOs and of those kind of anchor organizations, almost disproportionately underrepresented in the communities of color in which their organizations serve, right? So I certainly see this great need for us to build the network and mentorship of leaders of color, women of color, and diversity amongst nonprofit sector. And I think that it starts with ourselves in some way. I think we have to change the narrative and not ask. We deserve a place at those tables. And that includes then the philanthropic sector. As you talk to nonprofit, they have a role in ensuring that that equity happens as well. Counties and contracts and city contracts as well. I think that there's a space for all this you feel the difference in the world through COVID and what's happening, that there's an ear for that and a need for us to make those changes. And I think that this is the time that we really can speak to those inequities, especially as women in the positions that we're holding and creating spaces for ourselves, because sometimes they're not there for us. So I think that would be my response to that.
Mary Lou?
I love what Susie said. I do think that would be a great opportunity. For me, mine's more of on the micro scale. I think I had a lot that I needed to work through personally. Like I mentioned earlier to your question, is that my snippet would be of me crying because there was another situation where I was crying because I didn't realize how little I thought of myself. I felt like I couldn't do it, that I wasn't capable, and really having to unpack the idea of imposter syndrome. And I've seen it manifest in the way that I work with people, especially in the school districts. Think about how many of your superintendents are white, heterosexual, cisgendered males. And what that looked like for me to step into a room where that's what they always look like. And that was really tough for me, especially, you don't get to see me in person, but I'm 4'11" and I look like I'm 16. I act like I'm 16. And so that was something that I really had to work through. And I love having, like people like Susie and Ashley and other women entrepreneurs to make me feel like I'm not alone in the struggle, and that it is possible, and that there are people who look like me who are in places that are higher up. And I think the more that time goes on and having events like the one that we're doing right now gets to show girls like me that it is possible. And I think that's all that I've ever really needed, was somebody to tell me, like, you can do it. It's possible. Like and just to believe in myself. So if there's anybody else who's out there who is a woman of color, who's ever doubted themselves because they don't see people who look like them in these spaces, it is definitely possible. And I can't wait one day to work alongside all of you and know that we are going to change the world, because yesterday was International Women's Day and we all know that women are the future.
Ashley, you are very active in your community, but also, engage in so many circles. Well, what has your experience been from the perspective of a woman entrepreneur?
I think everyone has been welcoming in the communities to me, but I agree with Mary Lou. It's like this imposter syndrome that you kind of have. It's a battle of the mind, basically, and not seeing a lot of female-led entrepreneurs, a lot of minority-led entrepreneurs or whatever in your community can feel intimidating to a certain extent, because it's true. I see a lot of males. I talk with a lot of males. And so it's just like, okay, Ashley, you got this, and then based on your own experience, and me as an African-American woman growing up and have experienced discrimination, it's even more like, okay, I have to get over this hurdle too, because, I'm a person, I'm a human being, I can't view everything in the lens of, okay, I'm a victim or being discriminated against, and so really trying to get over that hurdle and trying to say, okay, these people are humans, right? They make mistakes just as me. And, I can do this, and it's about giving yourself that pep talk and saying, you can do this, and these people are nice people, right? Very nice people. And so really getting over the hurdle, the battle of the mind, because I think that's just really a lot of what it is. It is the mindset. And then also not seeing a whole lot of women and minorities in the field, but knowing that you're paving a way. So it's a great thing. Just to add on to that too, as well as I know that Susie kind of mentioned it, having resources for women and, minorities and things like that. I think too, as we pave the way, we should all unite and actually provide these resources down the line, because what's happening is, what I tend to see a lot of times is that it's very super competitive, and and I wish it wasn't that way. I wish it was more collaborative, to where we could just all work together and we're all killers in this game and we're all doing great. And so if we had more female entrepreneurs who united with one another, I think we could be a really powerful source. So that's kind of my feedback.
Thank you. I mean, I could make a long list of your superpowers, not only based on what you've just said and, the examples that you gave, but also, working with you for so many years. What do you think are your superpowers, those that helped you grow your venture, but also grow as an entrepreneur?
I think my superpower is just connecting. Connecting is one of my superpowers. And just being okay with being vulnerable, right? And just telling it how it is and being passionate and letting that passion show, because that is what's needed. This is what's going to create a change in our system. And so really being okay with vulnerability, being okay with making a mistake, being okay with reaching out to people and not knowing really what you want to talk about. Just being okay. Like Susie said, making those mistakes, or just taking the risk. And so I just think, I do a good job with connecting with people, and also coming up with, ideas on how to network with other people and fundraise and doing all these things. And so I just think those are my main superpowers.
And I think you mentioned something that entrepreneurs forget. They, when you ask them about connecting with other people, you are not expected always to sell something or to, deliver some amazing news. You got a grant or you got a contract. Sometimes, especially with COVID now, when people are tired of being on Zoom, and I think it's nice to, receive a text or just an email or a phone call, just chat. It doesn't have to be business, because we are tired of, conducting business over Zoom. And I think, that's, and I know you are an expert at connecting with people and engaging with people, not necessarily selling something, just engaging with them. Mary Lou, what are your superpowers?
I struggle with this question because of the imposter syndrome. But the first thing that popped into my head was I think that I'm a very good advocate for people, not just my students, but just whenever I see wrongdoing. And I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I'm a little feisty, especially for how small I am. If I see something wrong, I will stand up for it. And I think that's what the SEED program has always been, is I see that the system is broken and I'm not just gonna let that happen and not do anything about it and not say anything about it. And so I think I am fearless in that matter. I will talk back to anyone without holding back if it means standing up for someone and giving someone a voice.
Thank you. Susie, what are your superpowers?
I think it's connecting people or just making sure I have the right people in the room for the right things. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with anything. So unconditionally, I think that's the strength of, because I work around collaborations, and that's the world that I feel most comfortable for, and that we've kind of gotten known about, is making sure you put the right people that need to know each other in a room to do the best and leverage the collective good of a lot instead of individuals. I think I do that pretty well.
Thank you. And I think we only have 5 minutes left, and let's talk a bit about your future and your organization's future. What's next? And maybe kind of give a short about the documentary that we started talking earlier. Where did you start? Where are you now? And what's next for your organization and for your work? Ashley?
So right now, Magdalena's Daughters is focused on 3 initiatives. We're focused on conducting research and understanding more better how human trafficking is impacting our foster youth. So that is one thing that we're focused on right now. The second thing that we're focused on right now, we're actually in the process of developing a human trafficking educational curriculum. And so I'm putting a team of experts and people in our community who have worked with clients who have been victims of human trafficking. And so creating this educational curriculum for our middle school and high schools in our region. And then the last thing, obviously this is going to be an ongoing thing until we actually get the money, but really just raising the funds for our first pilot safe home for our foster youth. So those are 3 things that we are focused on right now. In the future, our vision is to have safe homes in communities, so grouped in communities in different counties that are servicing our foster youth population between the ages of 12 and 18.
Thank you. Mary Lou?
So I don't think I mentioned it yet at all, but we initially started, like I said, as a pilot program. We were at 1 school, and now we are servicing 4 high schools in the Val Verde Unified School District. And so I think the goal from there would obviously get our contract. Again, it is our 2nd year getting this contract, so our 2nd year working completely full time. Within the next couple of years, we do want to expand to middle schools. We're seeing how a lot of youth in foster care are already, really jaded. They don't want to be part of different activities when they're at the high school level. So hopefully if we can start getting them younger, they'll be, more engaged and willing to participate. So hopefully expand to middle schools within that same district, and then from there expand to some other local school districts. But for now, we're doing okay where we are, so we're not rushing the expansion just yet.
Thank you. Susie?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We're figuring out how to get the work out of Mexico in the middle of COVID. So I think we might have solved that issue. So I think that's a really big hurdle for us. So that's exciting news. And the other is we're exploring the possibility of actually having a space, like a small storefront space for us, and be able to sell the work and people to feel it and touch it and see it. And so that's very exciting for us after all this kind of pending waiting all through COVID. So we're excited about that.
I think we are. And just one last question before we wrap up. Any things that you have experienced and you did not expect to run into? I know it's a kind of a tricky question looking back, but something that really changed your, or a person that you have met that completely changed the trajectory of your work, and but also from a personal point of view, and it can be really anything. Mary Lou?
To answer the first part of the question, not necessarily a person or anything that impacted me, but I think one thing that I didn't expect was how personal it was going to get. I think, you know, starting a business, you're like, okay, business and my personal life are completely separate. But for me, I guess starting up that venture really uncovered a lot of like deeper feelings that I had. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to process these things and recognize how it's actually impacting my work. How is it influencing the students that I work with? How is it influencing how I choose to run this company? And so I think that's something big that I would advise people to look into is, you know, like what are things that have affected me in life, and is that could affect how I do my work or how I pursue this venture.
Susie?
Yeah, when you said that, Mihai, what came to mind was on the second trip we made, we met this artist, and his name is Miguel, in this small little town called Capula, where they make Catrina dolls, right? And he was up on this hill where no one, even taxis would take us up there anyway. We find him. There is it's like 4 o'clock, the light is leaving, there's no electricity in the house, but he's excited that we're there to see his work. And to the idea, like Mary Lou was talking, it was the relationships you make with individuals, but most important, I remember his face when I told him how many pieces we were thinking of buying and what it meant to him and his family, for him not to worry about food, not to worry about, you know, if they were going to have wood, you know, for the winter, and those things that we take for granted. But most notably, I think for me was the joy when he says, well, what do you want? I'll make anything you want, in Spanish, he told me. And I said, no, you pick the things that make you happy. You make whatever you want to for me, right? And it was transformative. His face lit up like, this is life, this is joy, this is what you bring to somebody, not just money, but you give them joy about what they do the best. And so I want to share his work with people that have never seen it, right? And that, I think it transforms your own life, right? Those are the good things that I remember, you know, and I hope for many more.
Ashley?
I think early on, I think I was trying to communicate who we are and what we do the same to everybody. And I realized, you know, you shouldn't do that. You should probably meet your audience where they're at, right? And so I know that even media, it's at like the 4th grade level. And so really just making it simple, not trying to throw all these fancy therapeutic words out there, and just so that people can understand, okay, what are you doing? And so I learned that early on to kind of switch up how I talked about Magdalena's Daughters. But then also too, I think one of the biggest revelations that I just recently kind of realized was that I was always so big pictured focused, right? I was just the big picture. This is the big picture. This is what I want. This is what's going to happen. But really, really focusing on like, what can you do now? You don't have this money for all of this and this and this, but what can you do in your community now, today? And so I think just being better focused about like present day and how can I make impact today? I think that's been helping a lot, just even with building connections and getting things started. So really just focusing what you can do now. So, yeah.
Thank you, Susie Gomez, Mary Lou Adriarico, and Ashley Hill for joining us today. This was the second day of the Entrepreneura Summit, brought to you by the Office of Technology Partnerships at UCR. There will be a follow-up conversation on Zoom with students, entrepreneurs, and those who are watching us on YouTube and are interested in joining that conversation, they will find the link in one of the chat boxes. Thank you so much, and looking forward to meeting you next year in the same format and talk about all the changes and all the progress that all of you have achieved in over a year. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Thank you.
You did so good, Mihai.